The massive viewing screens of Confederation Deep Space Monitor Station XK7 flickered with readings that made no sense. Senior analyst Velthar stared at the energy signature for the third time that day, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he processed the impossible data. "This can't be right," Velthar muttered, his scaled fingers dancing across the holographic controls. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, his blue-tinted skin shimmering under the station's artificial lights. As one of the Confederation's top scientists, he had analyzed energy signatures from dying stars, black hole formations, and even the legendary void engines of the ancient Precari civilization. But this reading was different. This was impossible. "Run." "It again," he commanded his junior technician, a nervous Quillen whose tentacles twitched with anxiety. The readings remained unchanged. The numbers glowed on the screen like cosmic mockery. Somewhere in the distant Sol system, home to the primitive humans who had barely achieved faster-than-light travel, an energy source was generating power levels that should have required the core of a dying star. "Sir," the technician squeaked, his voice box translating the clicks and whistles into standard galactic. "The readings are getting stronger. Look at this progression over the past 6 hours." Velthar's eyes widened as he watched the data unfold. The energy signature wasn't just impossible, it was growing. What started as a barely detectable anomaly was now registering as a Class 7 power source. That level of energy could move moons, crack planets, or power an entire star system for decades. "Cross-reference this with our database of known technologies," Velthar ordered, his voice tight with concern. "Every civilization, every species, every theoretical possibility." The station's massive quantum computers hummed to life, processing data from 50,000 years of galactic history. Advanced civilizations like the crystal-bodied ethereals, the mechanical synthetics with their reality-warping engines, the gas-dwelling nebula lords with their stellar manipulation technology. Every known form of power generation was compared and analyzed. After an hour of intensive computation, the result was the same. No match found. "Sir," another technician called from across the monitoring bay, "we're picking up similar readings from 17 other locations in the Sol system. Whatever they're doing down there, it's spreading." Velthar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. The humans were barely more than cave dwellers in galactic terms. They had achieved basic warp drive only 50 years ago, could barely maintain colonies on a handful of worlds, and their technology was considered primitive by Confederation standards. Their weapons were crude projectile systems, their ships held together with what appeared to be welded metal plates, and their computer systems were laughably simple. Yet somehow these same creatures were generating energy signatures that made the Confederation's most advanced technology look like stone tools on Earth. Engineer Kim Day sat in his modest laboratory, completely unaware that his latest experiment was causing panic across the galaxy. The small workshop behind his house was cluttered with salvaged electronics, homemade circuits, and dozens of failed prototypes. His neighbors thought he was just another eccentric inventor, tinkering with gadgets in his spare time. Day adjusted his thick-rimmed glasses and studied the small device humming quietly on his workbench. It looked like nothing special, a metal cube about the size of a shoebox, covered in hand-soldered components and blinking LED lights. But inside that unassuming case was something that defied every law of physics the Confederation thought they understood. He had been tinkering with what he called whisper drives, propulsion systems that seemed to work by simply asking the universe nicely to move things along. The idea had come to him in dreams, strange visions of flowing energy streams that existed between the spaces of normal matter, dark energy, the hidden scaffolding that held reality together. "The universe wants to help," he had told his wife, Park Min, one evening. "We just need to learn how to ask properly." Min had smiled and nodded, used to her husband's unusual theories. Day had always been different, even as a child. While other kids played with toys, he built radios that somehow picked up signals from impossible distances. His college professors couldn't explain how his inventions worked, only that they did. The whisper drive was his greatest achievement. Instead of burning fuel or manipulating gravity, It seemed to convince space itself to cooperate. The device would generate a field that dark matter found irresistible, creating currents in the invisible ocean that surrounded all matter. Ships equipped with whisper drives didn't fight against physics. They surfed along the universe's natural flow. "Honey, dinner's ready," called Park Min from the kitchen, her voice carrying through the thin walls of their modest home. Day looked up from his work, suddenly aware that the sun had set while he was lost in calculations. The whisper drive continued its quiet humming, its energy output completely undetectable by human instruments, but blazing like a beacon to the advanced sensors, monitoring Earth from light years away. "Coming," he called back, powering down his equipment with practiced efficiency. As the device went dark, monitoring stations across 3 star systems registered a sudden drop in the impossible energy readings that had been driving their operators to distraction. Day headed inside, leaving behind readings that would soon turn the Galactic Confederation upside down. Admiral Thexvar's flagship, Dominion's Pride, had never encountered anything like it. The massive warship, stretching over 2 kilometers in length and bristling with enough firepower to level continents, suddenly felt small and vulnerable. Its crew of 3,000 seasoned veterans from 12 different species had faced pirates, hostile aliens, and even ancient automated defense systems, but nothing had prepared them for this. The human vessel, barely the size of a civilian transport, had appeared at the edge of Confederation space, moving at velocities that their best engines couldn't match. The Dominion's Pride sensors screamed warnings as they tracked the approaching craft. According to their readings, the small ship was traveling at nearly 60% light speed without any visible propulsion system. "Sir, they're not decelerating," reported Lieutenant Kexthor, his reptilian features tense with concern. The tactical officer's claws clicked nervously against his control panel as he monitored the impossible readings. At that velocity, they should have torn themselves apart the moment they changed direction. No known material can withstand those stress forces. Admiral Thexvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, his silver skin gleaming under the blue emergency lighting. His 6 eyes moved independently, each one focused on a different aspect of the approaching threat. As a veteran of 40 years of military service, he had commanded fleets that conquered entire star systems. The Confederation's enemies learned to fear the sight of his distinctive crimson battle armor and the burning intensity of his gaze. But today, for the first time in decades, Admiral Thexvar felt genuine uncertainty. "Deploy the interceptor squadrons," he ordered. "Full defensive formation. If that ship is some kind of weapon, I want to be ready." Around the Dominion's Pride, hundreds of sleek fighter craft launched from their docking bays like angry hornets. The Confederation's elite pilots took positions in a complex 3-dimensional formation, their plasma cannons charging and missile systems armed. Each fighter was a marvel of engineering, capable of devastating attacks and protected by energy shields that could deflect most known weapons. Yet, as they watched the human ship approach, their sophisticated targeting systems couldn't get a solid lock. The vessel seemed to slip between their sensors like smoke, its exact position constantly shifting in ways that made no sense. Aboard the human ship, Morning Star, Captain Lee Jun calmly adjusted his controls, completely unaware of the panic he was causing. The bridge of his small craft was surprisingly simple, just a few comfortable chairs, some basic displays, and what appeared to be handmade control panels. Jun himself looked unremarkable, a middle-aged man with graying hair, wearing a simple gray uniform that looked more like work clothes than military dress. His navigator, Han Sol, monitored their approach to the massive alien fleet with the casual attention of someone checking the weather. Sol was younger, perhaps 30, with the relaxed posture of someone who had never doubted that the universe was a friendly place. "Look at the size of that thing," Sol said, pointing at the enormous flagship that dominated their view screen. "Must have taken them years to build something that massive." Jun nodded appreciatively. "Impressive engineering, though I wonder why they felt the need to make it so complicated." The Morning Star continued its impossible approach, weaving through space in patterns that should have been physically impossible. Unknown to its human crew, the ship was riding currents of dark matter that flowed like invisible rivers through the galaxy. The whisper drive technology that powered their vessel didn't fight against the laws of physics. It worked with forces that most civilizations didn't even know existed. "They're trying to hail us," Sul reported, noticing the incoming communication signals flooding their simple radio system. "Open a channel," Jun replied, straightening his simple grey uniform and running a hand through his hair. He had no formal diplomatic training, no advanced degrees in xenobiology or interstellar relations. He was just a cargo pilot who had volunteered to test humanity's first whisper drive ship, curious to see how far it could go. The main screen flickered to life, displaying the alien admiral's face. Jun had to admit he was impressed by the creature's appearance. The silver skin caught the light beautifully, and those multiple eyes were quite striking. The admiral wore elaborate armor covered in decorations that probably told stories of great battles and victories. "Human vessel," Admiral Thexvar's voice boomed through the communication system, automatically translated into Korean by the ship's simple computer. "You have violated Confederation space and demonstrated impossible technology. Explain how you achieved such velocities or prepare to be destroyed." The bridge of the Dominion's Pride fell silent as they waited for the human response. Around them, the entire fleet held its breath. Weapons systems hummed with barely contained energy. Combat computers calculated attack patterns and defensive strategies. Jun looked at the angry alien commander for a moment, then smiled politely. It was the same warm smile he gave to difficult customers back home, the expression of someone who genuinely wanted to help solve a problem. "We asked the universe to help us along," he said simply. It was quite cooperative today. The silence that followed could be felt across space itself. On the flagship's bridge, dozens of alien officers stared at their screens in disbelief. The fleet's most advanced translation systems double-checked the humans' words, certain they had made some kind of error. Admiral Thexvar's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among his species. In 40 years of military command, he had heard threats, demands, technical explanations, and desperate pleas, but never had an enemy, if this human was even an enemy, responded to his ultimatum with what sounded like a casual observation about the weather. "Clarify your statement," the Admiral demanded, his voice tight with frustration. Jun tilted his head slightly, genuinely puzzled by the request. "Well, we needed to get here quickly, so we asked the dark matter streams to give us a ride. They seemed happy to help. It's been a pleasant journey, actually, very smooth. The Confederation's greatest scientific minds had been studying human technology for weeks, and each day brought revelations that shattered everything they thought they knew about the universe." The research facility on Kepler Station buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with its massive power generators. Hundreds of the galaxy's most brilliant researchers had gathered here, their various forms of alien intelligence united by a single impossible puzzle. Dr. Yilthara, winner of 3 Nobel equivalent prizes and considered the foremost expert on energy manipulation in known space, stared at the human engineer Park Sue with something approaching religious awe. Her crystalline body structure, a beautiful lattice of living diamond that pulsed with inner light, trembled as she processed what she was witnessing. "You're not generating power," she whispered, her voice creating musical tones that resonated through the chamber. "You're not manipulating matter or energy at all." Sue nodded, adjusting his simple monitoring equipment with the casual air of someone checking a household appliance. The Korean engineer looked completely out of place among the exotic alien scientists surrounding him. While they wore elaborate protective suits and operated complex holographic interfaces, Sue worked with what appeared to be modified Earth electronics, held together with wire and tape. "We learned to work with what was already there," he explained, tapping a readout on his homemade device. "Dark matter, dark energy, they make up most of the universe, but everyone ignores them. It's like having an ocean all around you but dying of thirst because you only drink from tiny puddles." The assembled scientists exchanged glances of barely contained panic. Professor Klextai, a massive insectoid creature whose compound eyes could process 17 different spectrums of light simultaneously, leaned forward on his 6 legs. His translator box crackled with urgency as he spoke. "But how?" he demanded, his mandibles clicking with frustration. How do you interface with forces that barely interact with normal matter? Our most advanced civilizations have spent millennia trying to detect dark matter directly. The ethereal collective built machines the size of moons just to measure its effects. The synthetic hegemony created artificial intelligences that calculated for 10,000 years trying to find a way to harness dark energy. All of them failed. Sue's colleague, scientist Kim Hai, looked up from her notes with the patient expression of a teacher, addressing confused students. She was a small woman with gentle eyes, wearing a simple lab coat that looked like it had seen better days. Beside her sat what appeared to be a toy, a small plastic box with blinking lights that was somehow interfacing with the station's most sophisticated quantum computers. "We stopped trying to force the universe to obey us," Hai said simply. "Instead, we learned to listen to what it was already trying to do." The revelation hit the assembled alien scientists like a physical blow. Around the chamber, creatures from dozens of worlds struggled to process this fundamental shift in understanding. The mechanical synthetics' optical sensors flickered rapidly as they recalculated probability matrices. The gaseous nebula dwellers rippled with distress patterns that painted rainbow colors across their containment fields. Even the ancient precognitive seers, who claimed to see all possible futures, sat in stunned silence. For 50,000 years, galactic civilization had built increasingly complex machines to dominate natural forces. They had created engines that could crack planets, weapons that could ignite stars, and computers that could simulate entire galaxies. Every advancement had been about imposing their will upon reality through superior technology and raw power. Humans had simply learned to cooperate with reality itself. Dr. Velkan, whose species had achieved spaceflight when Earth's continents were still forming, spoke in a voice heavy with implications. "You're saying that consciousness, biological consciousness, can directly interface with the fundamental framework of space-time?" "Your consciousness directly interfaces with fundamental forces," Dr. Yilthara said, her crystalline form brightening. As she began to understand, her voice was barely audible, filled with wonder and terror. "That should be impossible." Hai smiled gently, the expression seeming to warm the entire chamber. "Only if you assume consciousness is separate from the universe, rather than part of it." She gestured to her simple device, which was now displaying readouts that made the station's most advanced sensors look primitive. "We discovered this almost by accident. My colleague Kim Day was working on propulsion systems in his garage, just tinkering really. He noticed that his equipment worked better when he was relaxed and thinking positive thoughts. At first, we thought it was just coincidence." Sue picked up the explanation. "But then we started testing it systematically. The whisper drives don't respond to commands or programming. They respond to intentions, to genuine requests made with respect and understanding. It's like the universe has been waiting for someone to ask nicely instead of demanding obedience." The implications struck the assembled scientists like a series of cosmic thunderbolts. Professor Zenthara, whose species had mastered genetic engineering on a galactic scale, rose to her full height. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered with distress signals. "You're telling us that every advancement we've made, every civilization we've built, has been taking the most difficult path possible?" She asked. "That we've been fighting against forces that would have gladly helped us if we had simply approached them differently?" Hai nodded sadly. "It seems that way. Dark matter and dark energy aren't hostile forces to be conquered. They're part of the universe's natural flow, like currents in a cosmic ocean. Once you learn to work with them instead of against them, amazing things become possible." The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of alien breathing apparatus and the soft whisper of Hai's impossible machine. 50,000 years of galactic civilization hung in the balance, challenged by two humans with homemade equipment and a completely different way of thinking about existence itself. The Confederation's greatest scientific minds had been studying human technology for weeks, and the research facility on Kepler Station had become the most important location in the galaxy. Scientists from every major civilization crowded into the massive observation chamber, their different forms of life creating a bizarre but magnificent gathering. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert hundreds of alien languages into something resembling understanding. Dr. Yilthara, winner of 3 Nobel Equivalent Prizes and the galaxy's leading expert on impossible physics, stared at the human engineer Park Sue with something approaching religious awe. Her crystalline body, a living structure of pure diamond lattice that had evolved on a high-pressure world, pulsed with colors that indicated extreme emotional distress. In her 300-year career, she had witnessed the birth of artificial stars, the creation of pocket dimensions, and the harnessing of black hole energy. Nothing had prepared her for this. "You're not generating power," she whispered, her musical voice creating harmonics that made nearby equipment resonate. "You're not manipulating matter or energy at all." Sue nodded calmly, adjusting his simple monitoring equipment with the casual confidence of someone who had long ago stopped being amazed by his own inventions. The Korean engineer looked completely ordinary among the exotic alien scientists surrounding him. While they operated floating holographic displays and quantum computation matrices, Sue worked with what appeared to be modified household electronics connected by common electrical wire. "We learned to work with what was already there," he explained, pointing to readings that made no sense to anyone but him. "Dark matter, dark energy. They make up 95% of the universe, but everyone treats them like they don't exist. It's like living next to a river, but dying of thirst because you only drink raindrops." The chamber erupted in clicking, whistling, and electronic sounds as dozens of species tried to process this information simultaneously. Professor Klexatai, a mantis-like creature whose civilization had mastered stellar engineering 10,000 years ago, reared up on his hind legs in agitation. His compound eyes, each one capable of seeing dimensions of reality that humans couldn't even imagine, focused intently on Sue's humble equipment. "But how?" he demanded, his translator struggling with the urgency in his voice. "How do you interface with forces that barely interact with normal matter? My people built particle accelerators, the size of solar systems, trying to study dark matter directly. The machine collective created artificial intelligences that calculated for millennia, attempting to harness dark energy. The Void-Touched learned to manipulate space itself, yet even they couldn't access these forces directly." Around the chamber, other scientific representatives nodded in agreement. The ethereal wisps, beings of pure energy who existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, flickered with patterns that indicated deep confusion. The Silicon Lords, whose crystal-based consciousness could process information faster than quantum computers, emitted harmonics of complete bewilderment. Sue's colleague, scientist Kim Hai, looked up from her handwritten notes with the patient expression of someone who had explained this many times before. She was a small woman with kind eyes, wearing a lab coat that looked like it had been purchased at a discount store. Beside her sat what the aliens had initially dismissed as a child's toy, a plastic box with blinking LED lights that was somehow outperforming their most sophisticated quantum sensors. "We stopped trying to force the universe to obey us," Hai said gently. "Instead, we learned to listen to what it was already trying to do. Think of it like this. You've all been trying to swim upstream against a massive current, building bigger and more powerful motors to fight the flow. We simply turned around and let the current carry us where it wanted to go." The revelation hit the assembled alien scientists like a cosmic shockwave. Around the chamber, creatures from dozens of worlds struggled to process this fundamental shift in understanding. The ancient precursor archives, massive mechanical beings whose memories contained the complete history of galactic civilization, actually stumbled backward as their processing cores overloaded. For 50,000 years, galactic civilization had built increasingly complex machines to dominate natural forces. They had created weapons that could shatter planets, engines that could move stars, and computers that could simulate entire universes. Every technological advancement had been about imposing their will upon reality through superior engineering and overwhelming power. Humans had simply learned to cooperate with reality itself. "Show them the demonstration again," Dr. Yilthara requested, her crystalline form brightening with desperate hope. Hai smiled and placed her hand on the simple plastic device. Immediately, the chamber's most sensitive instruments began registering impossible readings. Energy flowed through the room, not the violent, forced energy of conventional technology, but something gentle and natural, like a breeze carrying the scent of flowers. The plastic toy lifted gently into the air, not pushed by any visible force but seemingly supported by the universe's willing cooperation. It moved in graceful patterns that followed invisible currents of dark matter, dancing through three-dimensional space as if guided by an intelligence that existed beyond normal physics. Your consciousness directly interfaces with fundamental forces, Dr. Yilthara said, her voice barely audible as she watched the impossible display. That should be impossible according to every law we understand. Hai smiled gently, the expression seeming to warm the entire chamber, despite the presence of creatures who existed at temperatures near absolute zero. Only if you assume consciousness is separate from the universe rather than part of it. She gestured to her floating device, which now traced patterns that seemed to bend space around it. We discovered that biological consciousness isn't just an emergent property of complex matter. It's actually a fundamental aspect of reality, like gravity or electromagnetism. Dark matter and dark energy respond to conscious intention because consciousness is woven into the fabric of space-time itself. The implications crashed through the assembled scientists like a tsunami of revelation, sweeping away 50 millennia of assumptions about the nature of existence itself. The great assembly of the Galactic Confederation had never seen such turmoil. The massive chamber, carved from a hollowed-out asteroid and capable of holding representatives from nearly 1,000 worlds, buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with its artificial gravity generators. Creatures of every imaginable form filled the tiered seating, crystalline beings that sang in frequencies that could shatter glass, mechanical entities whose bodies clicked and whirred with computational processes, gaseous life forms contained in shimmering force fields, and ancient races whose civilizations predated the formation of most star systems. Some species called for immediate action against the human threat. The War Council of Xerion, a militant civilization that had conquered 17 star systems, demanded that humanity be contained before their impossible technology could spread. Their representative, a towering creature of living metal and plasma, gestured aggressively as it spoke through a voice synthesizer that boomed across the chamber. Others begged to learn these impossible techniques. The Peaceful Gardener Collective, who had spent millennia nurturing life on dead worlds, pleaded for access to human knowledge that could help them restore entire solar systems. Their spokesperson, a being that looked like a walking tree made of starlight, swayed gently as it transmitted emotional harmonics of desperate hope. Captain Jun stood at the center of this cosmic storm, his simple appearance contrasting sharply with the elaborate aliens surrounding him. While they wore ceremonial robes that cost more than most planets' annual budgets, technology that allowed them to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and bio-enhancements that granted them abilities beyond imagination, Jun looked like an ordinary middle-aged man in a plain grey uniform. His hair was slightly messed up from the journey, and he carried a thermos of coffee that he sipped occasionally during the proceedings. Behind him, visible through the chamber's massive transparent dome, engineer Bayek Ho monitored the demonstration, ship that hung impossibly still in space. The Morning Star showed no thrusters firing, no energy signatures indicating active propulsion systems, no gravitational manipulation fields. It simply existed where it chose to be, as comfortable in the vacuum of space as a bird resting on a branch. "We offer to share what we've learned," Jun said simply, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "But it requires changing how you think about existence itself." The statement triggered an explosion of responses. Hundreds of alien voices created a cacophony that the translation computers struggled to process. The Vorthan representative, a being whose species had achieved faster-than-light travel when Earth's sun was still forming, rose from its crystalline throne. Its body pulsed with colors that indicated extreme agitation. "What you're suggesting contradicts 50 millennia of scientific advancement," it declared, its voice creating harmonic overtones that made the chamber's walls vibrate. "Every civilization in this assembly has contributed to our understanding of physics, chemistry, and the fundamental forces of nature. You cannot simply Dismiss our collective knowledge because you've stumbled upon some unknown energy source. Around the chamber, other ancient civilizations nodded in agreement. The Silicon overlords, whose consciousness existed as pure information distributed across planetary computer networks, projected holographic displays showing the mathematical proofs that governed galactic technology. The Void Dancers, who had learned to manipulate space-time itself, demonstrated their mastery by briefly bending reality around their seating area. Dr. Yang Su, humanity's representative scientist, stepped forward with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years preparing for this moment. She looked even more ordinary than Captain Jun, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, wearing clothes that appeared to have been purchased from a department store. In her hands, she carried a simple tablet computer that was displaying readings that made the assembly's most advanced sensors look primitive. We didn't discover these abilities through superior technology, she explained patiently. We found them because we had to. Alone on one world, isolated from the galactic community, we learned that the universe isn't something to conquer. It's something to dance with. She gestured to her tablet, which showed flowing patterns of energy that seemed to move with their own intelligence. When you have unlimited resources and advanced technology, you can force solutions to work. When you're limited to what you can build in your garage with spare parts, you have to find elegant solutions. You have to work with nature instead of against it. The Supreme Chancellor of the Confederation, an ancient being whose species had witnessed the birth and death of galaxies, leaned forward on its throne. Its form was difficult to look at directly, something that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, appearing to observers as a constantly shifting geometry of light and shadow. "And if we refuse your partnership?" the Chancellor asked, its voice carrying the weight of eons. "What then, humans? Do you threaten us with your impossible weapons? Do you demand tribute from civilizations that were old when your star was dust?" Jun's expression remained peaceful, the same calm demeanor he had maintained throughout the proceedings. He took another sip of his coffee and smiled with genuine warmth. "Then you continue building bigger machines while we explore what the universe is actually capable of," he said simply. "The choice is yours. We're not here to conquer or control anyone. We're just sharing what we've learned, the same way neighbors might share gardening tips over a fence." As the assembly erupted in debate, voices rising in dozens of languages, creating a symphony of confusion and fear, Baekho quietly guided their ship through maneuvers that redefined physics itself. The morning star moved through space like a leaf dancing on invisible currents, asking dark matter streams to carry it effortlessly in patterns that would have been impossible for any conventional spacecraft. The engineer smiled as he felt the universe's willing cooperation, the same sensation that had amazed him since his first experiments with whisper drive technology. It was like conducting an orchestra, where every instrument wanted to play in perfect harmony, where the music flowed naturally once you learned to listen to what it wanted to become. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had shown that true power came not from forcing the cosmos to submit, but from learning to listen to its deepest songs. Whether the other civilizations would embrace this new understanding or continue their ancient struggle against the universe itself remained to be seen. The universe, patient and eternal, waited to see which path they would choose. The end.